I begin today by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded today. Also pay respects to the elders past and present, and extend that respect to any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be listening today. This is Melanated in Melbourne, a podcast designed to give an insightful look into the Australian lifestyle from the lens of two Black American besties. Welcome back, Melanation. I'm Ri'chard.
And I'm Nicole.
And this is Melanated in Melbourne.
Melanated in Melbourne.
It
feels silly singing sometimes.
Why does it feel silly? Like, people love it. Like, people see the podcast and, like, they sing it. Like, Steph literally said, I sing it every single time.
Oh, that's cute.
I'm actually going to start just editing it in the end and then the beginning. So whether you do it or not, it's just going to be there.
I'm just going to bring in a little Casio keyboard and just put on the samba beat.
Okay, Gene.
And then just...
Gene Belcher.
All right, sorry.
Wait, actually, which Bob's Burgers character do you think you are?
Which Bob's Burgers character do I think I am? I strive to be Louise. Like, I really do. I love how chaotic she is. I love how petty she is. But I think deep down, I know I'm Linda.
I was about to say, Lynn.
Just can't help but be embarrassing at times. But you know what? I'm living authentically.
You know, I would definitely say I strive to be Luis as well, but realistically, I think I'm Bob. Just kind of over everything. Everyone around me, they're trying their best, and I'm just like, I love you all, but you're all terrible.
You're all terrible. Oh my gosh. Cutest family, though.
They are. I've watched all of it all the way through, and it's kind of ridiculous, so I'm starting again. But it's an incredible show. Speaking of incredible show, we have an incredible show for us today.
Incredible show. Come on, segue.
I'm very good at segues. We have a spectacular guest, Saijal.
Yay! Welcome to the pod, Saijal. We really appreciate it. Because like Ri'chard was saying before, most of our podcast is about opinions. And yes, word of the day, opinions.
Opinion.
However, we were like, you know what? For this mental health episode, we're going to bring in a professional. So we are so happy that you could join us.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm happy to be here.
We're very happy to have you here.
Yes.
On the same question.
We're happy to be here, too.
We are.
You caught us on a good day.
Yeah, it's sunny. It's like sunny. It's one of those last few sunny days of autumn. It's probably just going to be rainy and terrible.
Correct. It's
right
about
afterwards.
to be clouded up.
With a chance of meatballs?
Oh, no.
No?
With a chance of meatballs, bitch.
But you're welcome. To the original question, do you watch Bob's Burgers? Are you familiar with the...
No, I initially thought you were talking about SpongeBob. Yeah. And then when you said like Linda and Louise, I was like, okay, I don't think we're talking about the same thing.
That's all right. We can talk about SpongeBob too.
We can always talk about SpongeBob. Technique. So actually...
Careful, Squidward. Careful, SpongeBob. Careful, SpongeBob.
Which character in SpongeBob do you most like?
I feel like I want to be SpongeBob.
Yes.
Because he's just like so happy, carefree all the time, but maybe I'm Squidward.
I love that honesty. I love that
self-awareness. I thought I was going to clock you as Sandy Cheeks. Like, I was like, oh, you're like, you know, you're trained, you're professional. I thought it was going to be that.
Yeah, I wonder why I didn't pick that. Maybe. Next time.
Right. That's the good thing about cartoons. You can just be whatever you want to be.
They're all imaginary. They're all talking sea creatures of sorts. So, like, it could be anyone. You could be anyone. What about you, Nicole?
These are very serious things.
Yes, the most serious.
I would say on my good days, I'm a SpongeBob. On my bad days, I'm a Patrick. Because Patrick doesn't know anything about anything, and he literally lives under a rock. But he's the comedic relief. But it's like, what's wrong, Patrick? I can't see my forehead. That's why he's upset. So, yeah, I think it all just depends.
I see that. I think I alternate between Mr. Krabs and Sandy. He's very serious, but he's also very driven for his goals. And then there's Sandy, who's just smart. But when she was hibernating and her friends just kept bothering her, have been there.
She was in her thick girl era.
I have been there. I've had plenty of my lovely, incredible friends bother me while I'm trying to rest.
I wonder who that is.
Which one of you is Dirty Dan?
I'm Dirty Dan.
But I don't want to go home.
Yeah.
I don't want to go home.
I want to go home. All right.
We do a lot of tangents, as you may have already seen. It's kind of our thing. We do love a good tangent, but so grateful to have you on the show.
Yes,
but let's give some of the listeners a bit of your origin story.
We'd love it. We'd love the lore.
But yes, we do love a lore drop.
Yeah, so I come from Mauritius, which is an island in the Indian Ocean. A lot of people don't know where Mauritius is. So it's off the coast of Madagascar,
Oh,
Eastern
yeah.
Africa. It's just a dot on the world map, so you can't even see it. It's very nice. It's very tropical. It's very beautiful. And I grew up there and did my bachelor's in Mauritius in psychology. So I was struggling with my own mental health before, especially during my teenage years. Like, don't ever want to be an adolescent again.
Yeah.
That was rough. But then I realized that I want to study psychology because I want to understand my own brain better. Am I always going to feel like this? Is there a way out? What's happening? And then that's how I got into it. And the more I got into it, I started learning about the nervous system. I started learning about trauma. And then I chose to do my Master of Counselling here in Melbourne because they had a trauma unit. And that really, when I saw that, I was like, oh, totally gravitated towards that. So that's why I came here to do my master's. And now here I am, a few years later. Now I'm a therapist and I specialize in trauma.
Oh,
incredible.
That is amazing. That's so amazing. And I love the fact that it came from such a personal place for you that you were like, I want to study this to understand what's going on with me more, because I think in this day and age, it feels like we're talking a bit more about mental health and mental hygiene more openly than before. I don't want to speak for the whole Black community, but I want to say that there's certainly a stigma. I'm sure every community has a stigma attached, but I remember hearing as a kid, one of my parents saying, oh, Black people don't commit suicide. Black people don't commit suicide. That's not something that happens to us. That's like a white thing that people do. And I don't know where that started for them, but it's something that's been perpetuated for a very, very long time. So it's really lovely that we're living in a time where we're like, no. Not necessarily. Everybody goes through mental health struggles, especially in this day and age.
I know, absolutely. I can co-sign because, again, not speaking for the whole community because you can never do that particularly, but I know outside of my family, because I've been in therapy off and on since I was 10, so like my mother's been very supportive of it my entire life. Beautiful. But I know we're the black sheep of the family by taking on mental health, like, hey, get the opinion of children, like let them have their own autonomy. But I know people outside our family would rather go to like black magic rituals and chew on roots than go to therapy. It's like, oh no, she just needs to touch some grass. She'll be all right. And like that's just been very much the mindset.
Her nerves are bad. She's got bad nerves. That's the saying that's used.
Yes, that's absolutely a thing. And the shift, especially during the lockdown and the COVIDs, where a lot more mental health options were available, like the certificate sessions. What was it called? Getting more sessions because of COVID. Like that happening here would not happen in America, and it did not happen in America. They were just oh, you guys are struggling. Did you try not being poor? Like, like it's very much that. So that shift and living here versus living back there, it's night and day. And we also can't talk about it with a professional lens without a professional presence. So again, thank you for being here. And I don't know if you had anything to add on to what we just mentioned there.
Yeah, and I think that this stigma around mental health and accessing mental health supports, that's same back home. Like where I come from, it's the same, and people think, if you go and talk to someone, you must be crazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so there's a huge stigma around that, whereas for someone like me, so I was also very lucky, just like you, because my mum was very supportive.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So when I said, I'm struggling, I want to talk to someone, my mum went out of her way, spoke with her friends, which I can't imagine that was an easy discussion to have, reaching out for mental health support. But my mum's always supported me, always supported my education, my career, and that's why I'm here today, to talk to you.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Shout out to moms.
Yeah, the support coming in from the house, because some people grow up in a situation where their first bullies are inside the house.
Yep.
And their first bit of adversity comes from home. So it's really lovely when people have like that support inside, like really, really good. And yeah, I'm glad we're here shattering the stigma.
Oh, 1,000%. So we did a planning session at the start of the year. Like, what do we want to talk about? And mental health is one of the first things we said. Because if we're trying to be as transparent as we can be, we have a lot of fun episodes where we joke around and we talk shit about things. Yes. But also mental health is very important and it's something that should be talked about as often as sexuality or as often as like just health. Like, it all ties into it. Your mind is the one running the whole show. And if you're not taking care of your mind, it's like ignoring the check engine light. Eventually you're going to shut down and it'll be at the worst time. So
It really does. And it feels like things are kind of, I don't want to say exacerbated, but things are even more intense nowadays. I think I was even reading a statistic that they're saying that more young people have now been diagnosed with things such as depression and anxiety, and those numbers continue to rise, and maybe even through all age groups. But what I think it maybe is just that we now have the language and the understanding is, I want to say universal, but it's probably not as universal as it really truly is. But now we have the ability to say like, oh no, this person's on the spectrum, or oh no, this person has endured trauma. And kids are able to voice and say, no, I have anxiety. I'm not just being a bad kid. I'm not just acting out. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel like so many people struggle, but when you don't have language to express yourself, you feel even more alone because you're in this experience, you're suffering so much, you don't even know how to call it. And especially for people who don't have English as a native language, and then you live in Australia.
Oh, yep.
You're getting asked all of these questions for a diagnosis tool, but these things, the ways in which they are framed, that doesn't mean anything to some people. Because we don't talk like that. We don't talk like that in our communities. So you're asking questions, you're speaking from a lens that the person who you're speaking to doesn't understand.
Correct.
And it's not based on the intersectionality of the person, because most of the research in Western society, in psychology, has not been done with people who look like us.
Yeah, true.
So it makes sense that, you know, in Australia we have more accessibility, there's more support, mental health care plans. But at the core of it, the Western mental health system still gives you a label. So, you know, you have a label. You're depressed. And it's great that now we're having more conversations about trauma, of course, because I'm so passionate about it. So I love talking about it. But also because so many people have so much trauma. Of course we're going to be depressed. Of course we're going to be anxious. And I feel like this is by design. This is not a mistake. It's not that we're all just struggling. We're all just depressed. Where is it coming from? This has been done by design. It's a system. They want to keep the system exactly as it is because it's working.
The system was never broken. It's working exactly as it should be. Absolutely.
Absolutely. If people just kind of operating in silos and just sequestered from everything else, and the disconnect, because if people bring in their pain, it feels like an inconvenience. Or like, I don't have time to deal with this. Sorry to start off with a really heavy one, but this automatically makes me think of grief and how we deal with grief as a society. Just the question of, how are you going today? Oh yeah, fine. It is a knee-jerk reaction. You kind of almost like...
You're programmed to say it. Like, you don't want to. Like, actually, I'm struggling with all these things, but...
Correct.
This is a passing conversation. You don't have the time. We're not sitting down to do, but then no one really sits down to like, hey, actually... I would like to talk about this. You have 10 minutes, you have 20 minutes, you have whatever, because you don't want to inconvenience someone else because everyone's struggling. And you're like, theirs is probably worse. And we kind of belittle our own struggles to not, like you said, not be an inconvenience to someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And then when people are dealing with grief, which ultimately, I believe, is something that needs to be dealt with in a community. One person cannot carry their own grief. I think it's something that needs to be carried and needs to be spread out with people that care, but they're shamed. Like, people carrying this grief are shamed. They're like, no, I have to hold it together now. I can't let anybody else know about this. And if somebody starts crying in public, it's just like,
avoid them. Avoid eye contact. You don't want to
avoid and walk past, and you're just like, oh well, looks like they're having a bad day. Anywho, I'm great kind of mentality. And I also feel like here in Australia, things are particularly polite.
Oh yeah, so polite.
Very polite. Nothing really goes like beneath the surface.
Everything is so contained. And especially in grief, in some cultures, you know, people get together and they just scream, they wail. And all kinds of healing, I believe, even healing from trauma, which is why coming to therapy is such a big deal in itself. It is such a huge act. One of my colleagues always says, coming to therapy is a radical act. Can't remember who originally said it, but it's true, because all healing happens in community, because especially in Western society, everything is so individualized.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then it's like, we're all struggling with the same thing, but because we can't talk about it, there's no space for us to talk about it, we feel even more isolated. So you feel like something's wrong with me.
Yes.
I must be the only one struggling with this.
Yep.
So then you start turning on yourself because you must be broken.
You must be broken. You're the one with the issue.
Everyone else is doing so fine. Look at them. Look at what they're posting. Look at how they're carrying themselves.
Yeah, that's a good thing to tie in, especially like nowadays with social media, which is essentially the highlight reel of everyone's life. Of course, everything's going to look hunky-dory and sunshines, butterflies, and rainbows because you're just seeing the good bits. Social media is just the good bits. But then it's kind of interesting when you do see the bad bits online. It feels like a cry for attention, or there seems to be a lack of authenticity. And I'm talking from my own self-belief. Sometimes when I see people crying on camera, I'm like, you're telling me that you set up your camera to cry and talk about this bad thing that happened to you?
Yeah.
You know? But I don't know if that means like I need to do a better part in being more empathetic. I don't know if maybe that is for outreach and everything. It just creates a lot of distrust with what it is that I'm seeing.
Absolutely. And I feel like in society, we're very uncomfortable with discomfort.
Ooh.
So anytime there's discomfort, we're like, oh, don't like that.
Yeah, don't
so
like
we
it. Get away from it for as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. So then we need to replace it with something else. We need to find a distraction. We need to fill the void because this is so uncomfortable. And one thing that popped up in my mind, especially when you talk about grief and nobody wants to listen to it.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to know how much you're struggling with it. And I think that this is also by design because characteristics of white supremacy always promote urgency and perfectionism. So you always have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And everything needs to be resolved really quickly. When we know that when you tap into indigenous practices of holistic well-being, you connect with your body, that takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, especially when you've been programmed to do the exact opposite.
Exactly. So we kind of look for Band-Aid solutions.
Oh, yeah.
What can I do so that I feel better immediately? And the system is designed around that. So then we're giving people solutions, but these temporary solutions aren't going to heal intergenerational trauma that people have been carrying in their genes for decades.
Yeah.
Oof.
Like
Yeah.
my pain, my parents' pain, my grandparents' pain, my great-grandparents' pain, my great-great-great. It goes on and on, especially as people of color, especially as a Black person, you're aware. You're always aware of it. There's not a single day that I do not think about it.
Yeah, there's not a single day that passes you don't think about it.
Yeah, because it always presents itself. It always comes out in some sort of way, and you're forced to reckon with it. And some days you deal with it the best you can, and you're able to succeed, and some days you just succumb to it. And I think that it's really interesting that you said the indigenous practice, where it feels like it takes into account the whole person, the whole human experience, rather than this compartmentalized, like, oh, you're unhappy? Well, keep that over there, because we don't want any of that over here. But I would love to hear more about that, like the differences between Western society and more indigenous practices.
For me, in my practice, when I work with clients, I love to work in a body-based way. So I use
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I use mindfulness meditation because I'm a mindfulness practitioner. So I use mindfulness meditation to help us connect to the body. Because if you think about it, after colonization, and I can only speak from my ancestors' culture, after colonization, yoga and Ayurveda, that was banned.
What? It was banned? Like banned. Like it was illegal.
It was banned in India. So when I read that, I started thinking, there's real power in this.
Otherwise,
They're
why would
afraid
they
of
be?
something.
Yes,
Yeah,
why
they're
would they be
afraid of it.
banning it?
Why are we banning a practice like this? And you can see that slowly in modern society, we are gravitating towards those practices again. Of course, a lot of it has been westernized,
Yeah.
but we have more access to these practices now. We're able to do it in modern society because it has been westernized. But I think it's really, really worth mentioning that in the Western mental health system, for me, there's like a pattern of pathologizing people. So you're the problem. So we give you a label, and then now
it's your responsibility to figure it out.
It's not a systemic responsibility. It's your responsibility.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if capitalism is crushing you, if racism is crushing you, just change the way you think.
Come on, preach. We need a tambourine button so badly. Because I'm like, she preaching in here. She preaching up in here.
And because I know you mentioned accessibility before, and it's like, if I could change the way I think, I would not be paying you for this session. So I think that connecting to the body, like Richard mentioned earlier, that check engine light, it makes sense that the body has been built with every tool that it needs for healing.
Yeah.
Because before, in community, in Indigenous communities, we weren't doing cognitive behavioral therapy. We used to get together in community and come together and have rituals and heal that way. And it would include, even in African communities, to dance together, to feel the music and the vibrations through the body. And then you can also you can release that energy into the earth, which we can do through dance, we can do through yoga, mindful movement, whatever people want to call it. But I think that's really important, because when we look at the things of value are the things that the oppressors have been wanting to take away from us.
Yeah.
Because if it's not valuable, why can't we do it?
Exactly.
Correct. It's connection, because when we are together, we are more powerful, which is a threat to the status quo. But when we're individualized, like, one person may not have all that power. So it's easier to, like, snuff things out. So I get that.
That's a full cosign as well. Like, even when we first joined the melanated group, because, like, I was going to be here for forever, I was like, I knew one or two other black people, and that was just it. And it just, like, anytime something weird happened, you're the only black person in the room, you felt like you had to act. But also, I don't really want to go to war against this entire room of white people and have to explain myself and why this is wrong. But when you know one or two other people of color, like, no, it is wrong. And that extra power, the strength in numbers, is personified by doing that. And even on the podcast, hearing the stories of other people of color who have lived here their whole lives, lived for a couple of years, experienced things that I may not have seen myself, but have experienced something similar to that. I'm like, oh no, you're not crazy for that. Like, that is a rational thing to react to, because I've been there. I've had this experience that's similar. And I know for myself, doing this podcast has decolonized my mind in so many different ways that I didn't even think about it. I was like, wow, we really did just get whitewashed. Like, that whole existing in Western civilization that has whitewashed us to the nth degree. And it's wild to bring it to the forefront and to be recording it for other people to also hear and have this conversation with their friends and family. Like, actually, this is all kind of fucked up, actually, like, in real life.
Yeah, community is everything. We've emphasized that a lot on the pod as well, because within connection, there's power. And it's just amazing to see. It's just amazing to see how that experience is so shared. And that was the one thing that I noticed here in Melbourne. And it's so funny because, I mean, it's still within a Western society. It's still within that, like, societal kind of structure. But the access to things just feels so much more open here, where it's like, back in the States, man, if you were going through something, like, if you were really, really going through something, I genuinely don't know, especially if you didn't have healthcare, I really don't know what could be offered to you other than if you go to a doctor, say that you're having a really tough time and you're concerned you may harm yourself, then you get committed to, I want to say asylum, but I don't think that that's the correct term.
Is it a mental hospital?
Mental institution?
I don't actually know what it's officially called. Would you happen to know?
Like, that's how foreign it is to us. Like, we don't even know what the word is for the thing they would put you in. Yeah, like, they would put you, like, under watch, essentially, and then they would take all your belongings away so you won't hurt yourself, and you're, like, put in a room and you're just, like, held, just so you get past this time that you don't want to hurt yourself. And that's kind of like, that's the Band-Aid. That's, like, the fix for it. If you are fortunate enough to have a therapist and you're able to, like, have some of your cost covered, you're still going to pay quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely. Like, accessing good mental health care, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
Especially when, if you don't have help from the government. I think here they call it the psych ward.
Psych ward.
Psychiatric, the psychiatric ward. But I think that in the Western mental health system, because even here, yes, we have more accessibility the government helps quite a bit, to be honest, because even if I compare it to back home, there's so much happening here. I'm not saying the system's perfect. It's not. But there is a lot of good things going on. So I do feel we do have to acknowledge the good things that we do have.
For sure.
But also what you mentioned about the Band-Aid solution, because you've reached a point where you want to die.
Yeah.
You don't want to be here anymore. And then just taking all your stuff, putting you in the psych ward. Okay, great, you get some mental health care whilst you're there. But if you have a background of trauma and you don't have anywhere to go to, or you don't even know that you're living with trauma because everything that you're getting told is just, oh, you've been diagnosed with depression. Here, take this medication. And like no stigma against taking medication, no issues about that. People who need to take medication, take their medication. It helps them to function. That's wonderful. And people should have access to that if they choose to do that. But it shouldn't be just the one solution.
Agreed.
So one solution, change the way you think. Second solution, take medication. But at the root of it, when we talk about how we experience things in society, when you talk about being a black woman, even for me being a brown woman, I can't change the way I look.
Sure can't.
I can't change the way people perceive me.
Correct.
So these are systemic and structural things that we don't have the power to change. And then with the whitewashing, we internalize it so much because what the message that we're receiving is that we're not good enough.
Yep.
Totally.
We just other.
We're just other.
We're just
correct.
other.
We're not thought of as the immediate or as,
Which just implies that whiteness in a lot of countries is the norm.
Yeah.
We just deviate from the norm.
Yep.
And so all of the systems have been built for people with privileged identities, not just in terms of race, different kinds of intersecting privileged identities, and then the people who have marginalized identities. And the more marginalized identities you have, the more you fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
Because the system wasn't made to help you.
Correct.
It wasn't tested on people like you. The research wasn't conducted on people who look like us. So it makes sense that then, sometimes even when we do have access to mental health care, you go and you see someone and you think, oh my God, this person is so qualified. They have all of these degrees. They're helping so many people. Why do I still feel like shit?
Yeah.
And then you internalize it. So on top of the shame that you internalize, because every day you walk in society, some people have ongoing racial trauma and it never stops. It starts from the day you're born, it ends with death. And ongoing racial trauma, since you're a child, that is complex PTSD.
Yep.
And it's like, why are we not talking about this when we have a very diverse population who are being impacted by this? And then you go and you see a professional and you're not even asked about that.
No.
You're not asked about your experiences of racism, but as a BIPOC, of course it's impacting on you. You're internalizing it, and then you feel tension in your body. All that constriction has to go somewhere. Then BIPOC populations have a higher level of health problems, lower life expectancy, alcohol and other drugs, and then they call it a culture problem.
Correct.
It's our culture.
So, socioeconomic issues. Yes.
Oh, no, I highly resonated with what you're saying about carrying the racial trauma, because I know even to this day, like as a child growing up in Texas, I'd be followed around in stores and asked to empty my pocket to do all these things. And even present day, I'm like, let me make sure my bag is here. Let me make sure you don't think I'm stealing, because having that experience would just honestly make me freeze up and just jump back to that age group where I was like, yes, I've talked about it and I've addressed it, but the fact that goes through my mind automatically.
Correct.
Instead, I'm like, oh, I'm going shopping. No. Do I have a backpack? Do I look like I would steal something? Do I look like a threat? Is still a thing that just goes through my head as a black man. Because, like, yes, I'm a queer black man, but unless I'm wearing something super gay, like this really cute crop top I'm wearing, they're like, oh, that's a black man. Is he a threat? Is he this? Is he that? And rather than just enjoying where I am, like in America, that's what I do all the time. In Australia, it's kind of better, but I still have that in my head. I'm still carrying that with me. I'm not thinking about, oh no, so-and-so's going to shoot me because of XYZ, but they're still going to treat me oddly, isn't it? Thought I'm still having. So I highly resonated with what you're saying with that as well.
Agreed. It's like you have to be mentally aware of so many different things. And we've talked about it before. but the appearance that you have to have when you go out into the world. And some people don't care. And that's fine. Like, you know what I mean? Like, to each their own. But I know that if I don't look a certain way, I'm going to be treated a certain way. And then I'm going to be suspected, or people are just going to have these thoughts cast upon you. And sometimes it could really go off like that. And it can get really dangerous really quickly because you're perceived as somebody who could cause trouble. And you have to be mentally aware of this all the time, whereas other people, white people, they don't have to take that into account. They can just show up as they are. They can just look as they are. And sure, somebody could maybe say, oh, well, I have to think they're not going to treat me if I'm not looking pretty or if I'm not looking handsome. I'm like, okay, but is your life in danger? Are you threatened? Like, are you put in a position where you could very well like lose your life, lose your freedom very quickly if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, looking the wrong way?
Yep.
And it's all these factors that you just have to be conscious of at all times. And it's exhausting. It's so exhausting.
It is really exhausting and really heavy.
Yeah.
Which is why, you know, when we go into a space to seek support, to seek help, all of that should be considered. It shouldn't just be one thing in isolation, because all of these experiences make you the person that you are.
Yes.
You're carrying all of that suffering. On top of the intergenerational trauma,
Yes, man.
now you have to
It's
carry
like, damn,
this
when does it end?
every
At
day.
I want to clock out.
Oh my God, yes. You're just like, oh my God, I'm done. It's just too much.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. And the trauma is chronic. So you're always in survival mode. You
Yes.
don't have that sense of safety. And for BIPOC people, that's a very common thing that goes on. Clients saying that I actually don't know what safety feels like. So what do you mean? You ask someone, just think of a time when you were actually safe. Sometimes for people, they don't have
for a
it.
while. They're like, I don't know what that feels. Yeah. Can't relate. I don't know her. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? It's actually funny because now that I think about it, even when I was trying to find like a good, because I haven't been able to find a therapist here in Australia, because again, you have to get assessed and it feels hard to get an assessment. Like I asked my doctor, I'm like, listen, I'm neurodivergent. I need somebody who's going to help me. I'm not even asking for the medication. I'm just asking for somebody who would be able to help me with this. And they're just like, oh, it's going to take a while. It'll take a long time to get you assessed. Like I've already been diagnosed. I was diagnosed with ADD when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Like, so from a very young age. But it wasn't until I was older that I realized that that was something that is a part of who I am and a part of the mental health, because it was always called a learning disability. So I always thought it had something to do with school. It had to do something within a learning capacity, and it wasn't until I was older. I'm like, oh, wait, no, this is about how my brain operates and how I deal with things and how I deal with triggers. Because when you are on the spectrum, you can have sensory issues. And again, did not even realize that that was a thing until I got older. Like sound being an issue, things are too loud, or just feeling of overwhelm and being in spaces. But mostly it's so hard when you are coming from a place that people know that about you, but they still don't necessarily want to do anything to help with that, or be like, how can I make this easier for them? Like if I see something that's upsetting someone else, I'm like, hey, how do we help you in this situation? Other people just lose their patience with it. And then even trying to find a therapist that would understand all the compounding issues.
Yep.
It's hard to find. It's hard to find, but I won't give up hope. I know it's out there. I just got to find it. I just got to figure it out.
Absolutely. And I think that's also important to say that, yeah, there are trauma-informed, intersectional therapists, culturally responsive. So we do have those people. It would just be wonderful if it was very easily accessible.
Yeah. Researched,
like everywhere, and it was financially okay for everyone to do that. So yeah, I totally hear you. It is really hard. For me, as a therapist, it was really difficult to find my own therapist.
Oh my God, I'm so happy.
I was actually going to ask about
yeah.
that. That was one of my questions, yeah.
So I see a therapist who lives in Singapore.
Beautiful.
So she works from Singapore, because
Awesome.
I found this person and I read their work, what they were posting, and I could really resonate with that. I was like, okay, you get it. You understand where I'm coming from. put myself on the wait list, waited a really long time, and finally I'm in. So yay. Because I think that support is just so valuable. Even when you're a therapist yourself, because you need the support.
Yeah.
Like, we all need support.
Absolutely.
It's not just something for weak people or whatever. We all need support because, like we said, we need community to thrive.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's really important.
I actually love that, because I think maybe when it comes to therapy, people are like, well, I've never really gone through anything so bad that I need therapy. But they're still having a tough time regulating their emotions, getting through the day, dealing with triggers, dealing with the weight of the world right now. Therapy can be for anybody. It doesn't have to necessarily be something deeply traumatic has happened to you. And I don't say that in a way to minimize, but I think therapy could really suit anyone and everyone. And a lot of times when people are like, I haven't really gone through anything that bad. And then when you start talking, you start opening up and you see that person across from you, like their eyes get really big and they're like, actually, honey, that's really like,
Yeah, that joke you told, that's trauma.
yeah, that's trauma. That's trauma. Like, that's actually, you need
like,
something.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna give you a hug because that was a lot, and like you laughed about it, but I'm worried now.
But people don't even realize that they're like carrying that and going through that because they've just never thought that what they've gone through has been so bad. And that's another bit of trauma. Like, that's another bit of it, of just thinking that what you went through wasn't as bad. It's small, and just get over it. Just get over it as quickly as you can, even though you can't get over it because you haven't even diagnosed yourself.
Yeah, and I think that it's really sad. It's really sad. We live in a traumatized world, that there's so much trauma, we don't even know sometimes that we're in the middle of the trauma. Like right now, we are always exposed to so much information. There's genocides happening all around the world.
Yeah.
And we're constantly exposed to that. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be. We should. We need to dismantle the system and be doing all of that.
Absolutely.
So yes, we need that exposure. We need to know what's happening. But like you said, even if someone hasn't had what they would categorize as personal trauma, we are living in a traumatized world. So then we need to keep that in mind and understand that with everything that's happening, this isn't normal. To see people who look like you going through a genocide, a whole population being wiped, that is not normal.
Yeah.
Living in society, having your friends or yourself experiencing racism every day in every different sphere of life, that's not okay. And a lot of the times, that story you said, some people talk and then they're just so easy breezy about it. And then you're listening and you're like, oh my God, that's child abuse.
Yep.
It's like, we did not all grow up like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had the same kind of thing happen to me when, like, I'm not going to go into the particulars of it, but I realized I had sexual trauma when I was describing a certain situation. And I was like, oh, no, it wasn't bad. He just told me that I had to do this thing. And I just didn't feel like I could say no to it. But it was fine. I did it and just went on from it. And then, like, the faces people had when I was telling the story to a friend. And I was just like, oh, I have much more deep-seated issues than I realized that I had just been pushing through it. Yeah, you don't even realize. But I also wanted to kind of get into, we have hyper awareness now because now we're connected to more things in the world, especially in the age of the internet and the age of social media. We're aware of much more than we've ever been, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I want to talk about mental hygiene. How do we take care of ourselves in this day and age? How do we take care of our mental space?
I think that, just like you mentioned, Richard, earlier, using that check engine light, it's there for a reason. Yeah. Use it. And I know it's not as easy as saying just connect to your body when we've spent years disconnecting from the body. So trying to find practices that resonate with you. Because some of the practices that we get through the Western mental health system, it may not work.
Yeah.
You may not feel like, hey, this is actually helping me. So looking at what kind of things make you feel better. For me, that may look like yoga. That may look like meditation. And yoga, because I've been doing it since I was a child. So it has a special value. It has a special importance in my life. So I think finding things like that. And also with being exposed to so much constant information, really knowing when we do check in with the body, where's the limit? Because yes, we don't want to be like, okay, I don't want to listen to that. I don't want to know. We don't want to be like that, because at the same time, we want to be aware. We want to do better.
Yep.
We don't want to perpetuate the same systems over and over again. But then at the same time, if you're absorbing it to the limit where you can't function, you're completely collapsing and shutting down because you can't take anymore, that's not serving anyone.
No.
So really checking in with ourselves, seeing, okay, where am I at? What's happening for me? And then community. We have to talk to each other. We have to talk to each other like all the time, share with each other, how am I experiencing this? Because sometimes it feels very isolating. There's a lot of suffering. But if we can hold it together, it makes it a bit better. It feels like, okay, I'm not the only one struggling with this. You've got my back. We're talking about this. Our values align. So really, for me, that's really important. Being around people whose values align with mine. Because then we value the same things. We're all looking out for each other, and that's really important. And I think in terms of practices, really checking in, when we check in with the body, we have the capacity to notice what makes me feel truly relaxed.
Yes.
What makes me feel truly good. When we're disconnected, it's really hard to make that assessment. But if we're really checking in, and once again, you know, could be yoga, could be meditation, qigong, tai chi, dancing, whatever it is, even, you know, drumming, people in drumming circles, people making music, whatever helps you to have insight, to check in with yourself. How does this resonate inside? I think for me, that's the most important investigation that we can do as people.
I love that. And one of the things you were saying about community, being around the people who your values align, that kind of thing. I know growing up, there was always like, oh, if you're surrounded by people who agree with you, you're in a bubble and you won't have the opportunity for this discourse. But I think at a certain point in society, especially now, that discourse is people who don't really want to understand the other side. They just want to be right, or they want to disrupt. And I found myself just cutting those people off. Like, I just don't want anymore, because I'm a stubborn person. I'll argue to the day that this is done. But I found how much that affects me and how much that's draining me. And when I realized that they don't actually care about understanding my side of it. They don't want to do this. They just want to pick apart. Like, especially with everything that's happening in Gaza recently, there's been one of my associates, I'm not even going to call him a friend anymore, who will only reply to some stories being like, what was the point of this story? What did you mean by this? When it's a very clear thing like, hey, mass graves are being discovered. These terrible things are happening. The post about protests, are the protests peaceful? It's like, are the police peaceful? Is capitalism peaceful? Is any of the things they're reacting to peaceful? And he's like, what's the point of this post? And I muted him. I was like, I know you just want a reaction because you've seen all my other stories. You've seen what's happening. And you're just like, what did you mean by this? Like, you are just picking at things. And I know for a fact that talking to him did not bring me joy, and fighting with that was just not going to be good for me. I know I felt like bad briefly, because that was my old me being like, no, you have to respect other opinions. You have to include them. You have to see from his side. I'm like, what side is that? Like, this was a question about what was the point of a post that was very direct. So you just want some discourse for the sake of it. And I'm like, I don't want that anymore. So I think that is really validating to hear that we should be trying. Yes, it's good to understand other perspectives, except when it's just like, hey, should all these people deserve to live their lives or die? Is not a perspective like, oh, yes, let me hear your point of why all these people should have died, and why Israel's defending themselves, why they're doing these things. So, yeah, thank you for that.
That's okay. And I think that sometimes it's really worth using our energy to have those conversations, to have those debates. But if the point of the conversation is just to tell you that you're wrong, and then you're using your energy, and we're passionate about it because these people look like us.
Yes.
For me, that could have been us.
Yeah.
Very
And
easily.
I would not want the world to turn a blind eye to say, why are you posting about this? Why are you talking about this? But then there are times when it's just wasted energy and you're just pouring out. But that's the thing, we pour out, but because we can't check in with ourselves, we don't even know when our cup is running low.
Yes.
But we just want to make sure that it doesn't get completely depleted, and that we are actually around people and we're exposing ourselves to things that also fill us up.
Yeah.
And that's truly important, because especially as someone from the BIPOC community, of course it's going to have different implications.
Yes.
it's like sometimes it's not an option to be silent because you feel like you're being complicit in what's happening.
Absolutely.
But then also just checking in with us, making sure that we're okay first, because if you don't have any energy at all, you can't help any of us.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that it is important to have a bit of breath work. It's actually so important because as an actor, we are taught that physiologically the emotions live in different parts of our body and we connect to it through the breath. When you cut off the breath, certain things come about. When you engage the breath, other emotions come about. So when you're able to take that time to really deeply breathe and really just give your nervous system just a little bit of a break, it's so very important. And it's nice to see that it's becoming more frequent or more widespread, this kind of knowledge, where I feel like maybe it wasn't really out there back then.
Yeah, I feel like it too. Honestly, with myself, how I got into mindfulness meditation, so starting breathwork, meditation, and all of that was through Western psychology. It's like when I was at uni, so I was at uni, there was a positive psychology unit when I was still back in Mauritius. And it was my favorite. And I was like, ooh, mindfulness meditation, what's that?
Yeah.
You know, you read it in the textbook and this white male has said this famous quote and you're all interested. So I wanted to know about it. And just because I was also really struggling, I couldn't sleep. I had so much insomnia. I couldn't sleep. And it's, of course, horrible because you can't get rest. And then you feel even more dysregulated. So I found this tool that helped me so much. But even then, reflecting over my journey over the years, I've realized that when it was attached, of course, I wouldn't think this way now because I've changed and evolved. But when I was younger, that idea of whiteness being associated with value, for me, any indigenous practice, I was like, no, I don't want to try that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you want to assimilate well. You want to do
Proximity
the things.
to whiteness, you want that, like you're striving for that. Yeah.
You want proximity to whiteness because that gives you safety. Well, it gives you a sense of perceived safety.
Yes, that's it.
So then I was reflecting on that and thinking about, how come all of us want to do yoga now? We want to do yoga. We want to do breath work.
Now. Yep.
It's very trendy. On the one hand, it's really good because it makes it accessible for so many people who otherwise would not have access to those practices. And then on the other hand, we also need to appreciate culture.
Yeah.
Because the same people will promote a practice and with the other hand also promote racism.
Yeah.
And then that's when it becomes very damaging. But I agree with you, the breath, I think, is just one of the most powerful things because it's with you everywhere you go.
It's with you everywhere you go, but then at the same time, it's something that we've only just become really aware of. And I still follow like Sesame Street on Instagram and everything. And the other day, Elmo was teaching kids how to regulate their emotions through the breath. They're like, are you feeling a big feeling right now? And it's really uncomfortable and you feel you're screaming and crying and it's hard to breathe. Why don't we put our hands on our tummy and then take in 3 big breaths? And I was like, what? Elmo's with it? I'm just so impressed that how far it's come, and now it's starting at a younger age that we're able to tell kids, because emotional regulation is something that we've, again, feels kind of like a new concept. And we get angry at children for not being able to regulate their emotions, but there are a lot of adults who don't know how to do the same thing either.
Because we were angry at them as children and they never had the chance to get there. It was like, stop crying. I'll do something to cry about, this. And then you just never got to that. I was like, well, that's, of course we can't. I was never allowed to. Yeah,
exactly. You're not allowed to express yourself. It's always a cap or, again, the silo. Don't cry, or I'll give you something to cry about. Oh, my God. That one's a classic in all the wrong ways. In all the wrong ways. But it's nice that we're starting from a younger age, and I hope that we just kind of continue to grow within our education.
Absolutely. And I do think that, yes, emotional regulation is something that's taught. So then when you as a parent didn't learn that, you can't teach it to your child.
Yeah.
And then there's the discomfort thing again. You feel uncomfortable because how do I manage this? How do I get this child to stop feeling this way? Because that's what we do in society. Oh, you're feeling really bad. Don't feel that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's always a stop doing that. Don't do it. And yeah, it's always like a stop associated rather than actually let's just sit here and why don't we feel this way for a bit? Why don't we just sit with this feeling for a little bit and we just see what's there and let's just be aware of it. It's always like a constant needing to fix something when sometimes you don't need to fix, you just need to sit.
Absolutely. Like, nothing's broken with us.
No.
We don't have anything to fix. We learn how to manage things. We learn how to listen to ourselves so that we can continue in a more sustainable way. But yeah, there's nothing to fix because nothing's wrong.
Yeah, and it's also hard to get out of that mindset too, because we're always thinking that, well, if I fix this, then I'll be happy. And a lot of the times we do that through instant gratification sources.
Absolutely. I feel like that is so common in modern society. We want these quick fixes, right?
We want the quick fix.
There's the sense of urgency in everything that we do, whether it's at work, whether it's for mental health, in relationships. This sense of urgency, we always have to be running and doing things quick.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we apply that to mental health, like the nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you felt shit for 20 years, 2 days isn't going to fix that.
No.
Yeah, exactly. I know we're just around the corner from mental health hacks. Like we are. We're so close to it. I know there's going to be like a TikTok of some kid just being like, you want to feel better? Then just
Do this thing.
do this thing. And it's like we're rounding the corner of it because everybody just wants things so quickly.
On the topic of instant gratification, one of the things I did really talk to, like a bit of a topic shift, was like getting out of a system where like you felt this way for 20 or so years, and then you get to somewhere that feels better, that feels slightly safe, and then that bit of survivor's guilt, if you will, because one of our listeners asked about how we were processing survivor's guilt by being here and seeing all the things happening back home and not being able to be with our friends and family, but we are in a better life, but knowing that that's actively affecting people we grew up with, that would have been us sitting right next to them as COVID was happening, as all these protests are happening, as all these terrible things are happening to the people that we love, but we're over here living a arguably better life, arguably safer life here, and I'm enjoying this, but I know they're not. We're both going back to the States soon. And I know for myself, I'm going to get that anxiety ball of like that extra attention. Like, oh, that person's walking really close behind me. Do they have a gun? Is it this? Do they hate me? Like, do they want to attack me for who I am? Do they know me? Or are they just unwell and they're just about to attack anyone because I'm around? I'm a wrong place, wrong time. I guess survivor's guilt is my main thing, like dealing with that. Because, again, that's not a thing you get to get over. Like, I feel better here after living in America for like 2.5 decades, but going right back, a lot of the things come right back. And it's just like, I love you, I miss you, but I don't want to be here kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I think that that's fair enough. It's fair enough that you don't want to be there and that life is better here. And it does come with that sense of guilt, which I also think, like I say, everything is by design, because if we feel guilty and we feel shame, it creates a lot of lateral violence. We internalize it, we take it out on each other. This is not our fault. The system is broken. It's the system that's the problem. But then it's so much easier when we're so powerless against the system, we turn against each other. And then I can say, well, Richard, why aren't you back home doing this or doing that? And it's like, you wish. But if the system allowed you to do that, you would do it.
Yeah.
Because we all want to be home. We all want to be with our families. And I think it's kind of a different position for some people to understand sometimes, that systems don't work the same everywhere. And that sometimes you have to leave some things behind to create a perceived sense of safety for you. Maybe it's just 5% more safety. Maybe before you had 0.
Yeah.
So I think keeping all of that into mind, because it is a privilege and an opportunity to be able to move away and to create a better life for yourself. And I don't think that, I know it's easier said than done, but it makes things even harder. On top of everything that you've experienced, now you need to carry this guilt. So finally in a place where you can enjoy some privilege, you can't even enjoy it in a carefree manner because the guilt is then weighing you down.
Yeah. I kind of feel like people aren't really saying to you, you should feel guilty for being over there.
Yeah.
Like, it's coming from inside. And I guess it's just that discomfort that you once had when we were living over in America, that guilt or that negative feeling just has to go someplace. It's hard. And it's hard to just release it and let it go. And now it just kind of lives inside. Once it was outside, but now it's like inside because you've been living with it for so much of your life.
Absolutely. And when there's no spaces for us to externalize things, it has to go somewhere.
It has to go
so
somewhere.
it has to go inside.
It has to go somewhere.
And I think here, when we do live with this sense inside of us all the time, what you said, Nicole, is very valuable to just sit with it.
Yeah.
To just get to know with the investigation, where does this live in my body?
Yeah.
When does it come up? Does it come up around particular people?
Yeah.
Does it come up when I'm by myself and I'm feeling a certain way? Where does it live? What is it saying? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What is the sensation?
Yeah.
Like everything, and just creating space for it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times there's not much that we can do, especially in the face of oppression.
Yeah.
I understand there's activism and all of that and advocacy, and I truly believe in all of that. But then sometimes on an individual level, you feel so powerless.
Very.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard, and it's really heavy feelings. So apart from being with it and finding a way to care for yourself through that,
Yeah.
but also then decolonizing the mind,
Yeah.
decolonizing the nervous system. These are all byproducts of colonization.
Yeah.
This isn't because of us.
Yeah. It's always been here, and just kind of being, well, indoctrinated with it, just being told, because that's just how things are. I know that I've been able to protect my peace a bit more with being here, which is good, because I think when I was growing up, I loved my family down, but I was just living in a place where I was just constantly corrected, always told I was doing something wrong, always asked, why can't you just be normal? Stop being weird. Stop being this, stop being that. So it was just like this hyper overcorrection. And it's something that, again, you leave the environment, but then the environment lives within you. And so all of that stuff became my internal voice of being like, you're doing this wrong, Nicole. Nicole, why can't you just be normal? Why are you so weird? Why can't you just do things this way, the right way? And I think removing myself, I think, is how I've been able to not solve it, but just deal with it, like just getting a bit of space from it, which is probably hurtful, but for my own sake and my own survival, it felt necessary. And then I kind of go through my life here as doing the same thing. I'm like, I need to be in a space with people who are just going to be able to accept me for who I am, because there's nothing I can really, not in like a toxic way of being like, I can't do nothing about myself and like y'all just gonna have to deal with it and I'm just gonna be awful and terrible. I'm gonna make mistakes, of course. But when it comes to who I am as a person, it's just like I need to be in a place of acceptance with you, because I'm in a place with acceptance for myself, because I feel like that's like really the first step to self-love is acceptance. And again, going back to your thing of like, there's really not anything that needs to be fixed. It's just how it is. Like, granted, yes, there are problems that need solutions. But when it comes to like who you are as a person, I'm not a fixer-upper, and I always thought I was. And I always thought I was. I always thought like, if I just fix this one problem, then I'll be fine. Then I'll be normal. And then I will be worthy of love. That's what I've always thought. That's what I've always thought. And it wasn't until I was like, you know what? I'm worthy of love now. Like right now, as I am, even though I'm like a mess, so be it.
Worthy of love, and you'll get those upgrades over time. Like you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I've upgraded this part of this, I've changed this, but your core is still lovable. Like you're just gonna keep changing or improving. Like you're gonna keep improving over time. Like as you learn, you grow. Those experiences are going to mold you into a better person, but you always, at your core, have to remind yourself. And once I got there, I found myself in a similar position where when I found myself changing, people back home would be like, oh, that's not who you were. That's not the person that I knew. And coming here, I was able to be the person that I felt the most comfortable being. And with that extra layer of safety, I was able to blossom the person I am. Some people are like, oh, you're too big, you're too that. I'm like, well, I was small for a long time. They got me nowhere, so you can fuck right off.
Again, I have the disease of being nice, and they want to keep you nice and kind, and they want you to stay a pushover, and they want you to stay a doormat. And it's like, I've evolved beyond that, and I'm not going back.
Because when you please other people, it appeases their nervous system. But then, what you're talking about, Richard, when you talk about, now I'm louder and I used to be so small, that shame keeps you really small.
Yeah.
And shame is a very, very potent emotion. Because it controls you so much. And then when you're always in survival mode, you're in fight or flight, right?
Absolutely.
So in fight or flight, there's no space for you to feel connected to other people, for you to feel safety. So it's really difficult for you to be yourself, to be as loud or as big as you want, and to go and seek out the connections, make friends, because you're not safe. So it completely makes sense. And I think it's beautiful that you were able to come to a space where you were able to experience relative safety and you actually felt like you could be yourself. Because that's one of the most beautiful things, when we can just be ourselves and accept ourselves for who we are. Because a lot of the time, for people who are not in privileged bodies, we get the messaging that, something must be wrong. And you get told who you are. It may not be at all who you are or what you identify with, but everyone will make sure to tell you who they think you are, who they think you should be. And I think one very important way of also keeping ourselves sane and regulated is also, whenever we're having thoughts, to just notice those thoughts.
Yes.
Noticing, what is it that I think about all the time? And also, whose voice is that?
Yes. Yeah.
Because a lot of the times,
it's
this
not
isn't
even
our
that way.
voice.
Yeah.
Yep.
I call mine Pigget. That's the mean voice inside my head. I call them Pigget. And I'm just like, whenever I notice that they're being a dick or saying something, or like just being like, oh, why did you do this? Like, well, why did you do that? And I'm just like, that's not me. That's Pigget.
Yep. I love that. I mean, love that.
What's like when you're able to like name something and you're able to be aware of it, then you're able to you reduce the power, because it's just noticing the thought, and thoughts pop up.
Yeah, intrusive thoughts. Something they're just like an idea, like oop, they just pass it through. It's not yours necessarily.
Yeah, it's not necessarily yours. So it's just better to just notice it and then just kind of be like, oh, that's how I'm thinking. Or even emotions, even just like feeling. It's like, oh, that's how I'm feeling right now. All right, I noticed that. Let me see how I'm feeling in a few minutes from now. If that feeling is still permeating, why am I feeling this way? Being more curious about it, rather than just being like, well, I'm feeling this way and I need to not feel this way. I need to fix this right now, which, again, exhausting.
Instant gratification, exhausting. Yeah, you need those things.
Yeah, it takes more energy.
It is really exhausting. And like in meditation, I taught a class on this yesterday, which is very coincidental. So it's great because I'm ready to talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that a lot of the times we take our thoughts as the truth.
Yes.
We identify with it so much. And especially when we're having negative thoughts about ourselves, when we believe that is the truth, feel like shit.
Yeah.
Because it's not nice, you wouldn't say those things to someone else, but we internalize it and then we feel really dysregulated.
Yeah.
And that is just a really hard experience to have. And it's really hard when we identify with it so much, but when we just notice it, we actually know. We know what's happening. You can see the thoughts. You can see it's fleeting. Everything passes. Just like we're not happy all the time.
Yeah.
We're not going to be sad all the time. And that being said, I do want to acknowledge that with trauma, sometimes it does feel like you're really stuck and you're in this situation. So I don't want to discredit that this is the felt sense of many people. But in the context in which we're talking about the thoughts and what we identify with, when we just notice it, it creates space between us. Then you have space to breathe. You have space. That's all we need, just to create that space, and also acceptance, like you said. Because with acceptance, we just accept that, okay, things are like this. So then we're not judging ourselves for things being like this. And it's really, in meditation, there's a term called resistance. So whenever you experience something, you experience it as, so something bad happens to you, and then you're having thoughts. You're like, oh my God, why am I like this? What's wrong with me? I'm not good enough.
Yeah, what self-worth.
Yeah.
That's creating more resistance, because what we don't want is if I tell you, Nicole, you can do everything today except touch this cord. That's all you're going to want to do.
Yes, I just want to touch the cord.
Yeah.
For the listeners at home, I touched the cord.
Yep.
And
She touched the cord.
And I'll do it again.
And it's the same thing with emotions. When we feel a certain way, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to feel this way. Oh, I don't want to have this thought. That's all you're going to think about.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's like, don't think about a big pink elephant. And then the first thing that pops in your mind is the big pink elephant.
Yep, it's here.
Yeah, it's here.
Is the elephant in the room with us right now?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think, the key, and it's really liberating when we recognize that the key is just to create space, just to create acceptance. Because honestly, if the key was to go and change everything, oh my God, count me out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's too much work.
That's a lot. That's a lot of investment. One of my favorite things to do whenever self-talk pops up is, like, I'm very protective of my friends. If someone said that thing to one of my friends, like, oh, we're fighting. So, like, well, why am I letting myself say that? I'm like, if I said, oh, you're stupid, you're worthless, you're this. If someone said that to Nicole, we're fighting. We're on site. And, like, why would I allow myself? I have to be friends with myself to try to fight that. It's like, oh, no. You're friends with yourself too. Like, this is my best friend. I'm here with myself forever. So I was like, why would I allow myself to keep any of my oldest friends, closest friends, anything? No one's talking shit about them. I'm not going to talk shit about myself. Like, stop that. Like,
like mean self-talk, man.
Yeah.
Like, that voice inside your head could get reckless and wild and so mean and say some of the meanest things ever. And if it was outside, if it was another person saying it, you would punch them in the face.
Yeah.
So don't do it to yourself on the inside.
Did you have any other questions or things that you want to bring up as well, Nicole?
I just kind of want to say, if you are out there and you are struggling with your mental health or just struggling with your emotions, there's nothing wrong with going to talk to someone, and there's nothing wrong with going to seek out help. And when we ask for help from others, that is such a service to ourselves. So be sure to honor that. Treat yourself as you would a small child. I don't know if that's reductive, but I think that's what self-care mostly is. Treat yourself like you would a small child and take care of their needs. And do what you need to do in order to take care of yourself, because you cannot pour from an empty cup, even if you are taking care of a lot of people, and that is your role. Make sure you take care of yourself too, and do what you need to do in order to take care of yourself. And I think that's just like the biggest takeaway from today. I really, truly feel that that's the biggest component of, to thine own self be true in action, but also in care.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that it's worth mentioning that sometimes you're going to go and seek help from people and they won't be able to meet you where you're at. And that also doesn't mean that something's wrong with you, because even for me, and you've also said this, Nicole, it's hard to find a therapist that aligns with you and really resonates with how you're feeling and can really meet you where you're at. And I think that's also a process that takes time. So, sometimes you try once and it is a huge step. It's a huge step to go and find someone, because you know what you're going in there for. You're going to have to talk about your trauma, your worst moments. You're going to have to relive it again. And it's really, really difficult, but not to give up. Sometimes we do meet people and it's just not the right people. So it's not easy, but we can keep looking because there is support out there.
Yes.
And we will be better for it.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah, my thing is on the same subject of what you were saying, is having the patience with yourself and the process. Because I won't give my ex credit for a lot of things, but I will give him credit for helping me find a therapist of color while I was here, because I started going back to therapy in 2020 when it was the height of the protests and COVID. And I was here while we were obviously suffering in our own ways back in the States. My friends and family were going out in the streets and doing all these extra things. And I just felt like I couldn't be there for them. And like, he found a therapist of color for me has been absolutely wonderful. And just be able to confide in them, talk to them about that. But I have a friend who's rocking French who French is his first language, and he lives here now, but he wants to get a therapist. And that list is also super hard of getting someone of color who French is their first language. So like that waiting list is so ridiculous. But having the patience and knowing that you're worth that effort, you're worth that instant gratification can only get you so far. But knowing that at the end of the day, doing it now and going a month or two later, or a year or two later, I'm like, if you didn't do it, that 2 years of difference, that 2 years of healing, you'd be a fully different person. So having patience with yourself and just having patience with the process is not great. It's not perfect. And looking for someone who looks like us, who has your experiences, especially here, will be harder than you would like it to be. But doesn't mean that it's not impossible. Like, I'm living proof of it as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anything worth having is worth fighting for.
Totally. It is completely worth investing in yourself. And also, I speak French.
Hey.
We don't have to do that connect.
Oh, I mean, speaking of that, like, because I know you
right.
said you were teaching classes. Did you want to plug any of your professional sites? I don't know what you're allowed, obviously, if they listen to the podcast, if it was an ethical crisis to have you as a therapist. But we usually give everyone the opportunity to plug their classes or things that they're working on, or anything that they want to get their message out, or what they're working on out, if you want to take that time as well.
So I'm actually in a 2-year training to be a meditation teacher.
Yes.
So I'm not trained yet, so I will not be promoting
Okay.
my classes.
Damn.
I just
But
don't think
okay.
that's ethical.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's ethical. I don't function in that way. I want the certification first. But I do have an Instagram page called Santé Mentale Maurice, which just means mental health Mauritius.
Okay.
And it's content in Mauritian Creole that I post, because there's so much information in English, in French, but a lot of people don't have access. They don't have access to that information because maybe they're not as fluent in those languages. So I really wanted something that was missing. I wanted to
Fill that void.
fill that void. I wanted to talk to people in my native tongue, in our native tongue. And then we can have those conversations and break that taboo, because I don't think that it should only be people who have access to Western languages who should have access to looking after themselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, that's amazing. I mean, I think that's a really good wrapping up point.
Me too.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. This has been fantastic.
you.
I know the listeners are going to eat this up. I learned a lot. I felt a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I know this was a podcast before, like, went to church. Like, it just feels like
Yeah.
it was a great experience.
Like I said, I
all
need the
over.
tambourine button.
We'll download it. Like, we've got 8 little options here. But thank you again so. I can't speak any more highly of this experience,
Yes,
and
thank
so
you for
grateful
your
for
time.
that. But until next time, I'm Ri'chard,
And I'm Nicole.
and this has been Melanated in Melbourne.
See ya.
This has been Melanated in Melbourne, a podcast that analyzes the Australian lifestyle from the lens of 2 Black American besties. Visit us at melanatedinmelbourne.com or follow us on Instagram to send us your comments or questions. Thank you for listening.